Merry Christmas everyone. I hope you're all having the best of time as you can in this awful situation. Hopefully you're surrounded by family and friends, or you're able to video chat with them or something like that. And I hope you also got some really nice gifts as well. If you got something interesting, maybe leave a comment, it would be nice to discuss. I got an orange. The funny tasting orange. Anyway, today we are here to conclude our two-part Zelda special with Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, a new Warriors game set in the Breath of the Wild timeline before Breath of the Wild. Just before we get into it though, is Breath of the Wild a reboot, a new timeline, or have they just all merged together? It doesn't seem that Nintendo has forgotten past Zelda games with the Link's Awakening remake, good game by the way. But it does seem Zelda will change thanks to the Breath of the Wild. I mean, how many Zelda games can you count that's got a major console sequel or kind of prequel? More on the kind of bit in a second. There's only really Zelda 2 or Majora's Mask. The rest, while still great, were handheld games. I suppose you can count Twilight Princess, but it's kind of outside the window of as sequels go. It's as direct as Skyward Sword is a prequel to Breath of the Wild. It's technically is, but who cares? Anyway, back to the subject at hand. Age of Calamity tells a story set 100 years before Breath of the Wild. Not the story anyone was expecting. I'll get a bit more into that later. Let's start with the gameplay first. Like the previous Hyrule Warriors game, it's a simple hack and slash game where you use fancy moves to take down hundreds of enemies with various upgradable characters. Notice I said hundreds and not thousands. Unlike the previous game, I wasn't killing nearly the same amount of enemies. I think I know why, as there's a larger emphasis on different kinds of tasks and mini-bosses in the game. You still kill hundreds though, and there's lots of enemies on the map like before, but it might be a bit too much. I don't know if it's because the Breath of the Wild art style or the previous game was designed for weaker hardware or just poor general management. The frame rate in the game is bloody awful. This game seems to be set at 30 frames, and when it hits that frame rate, the game feels very good. But sadly, the game is normally in the 20 FPS area, and in the Warriors game, that's no good. I suffered from terrible eye strain within a few minutes into a session with this game, and I'm normally okay with fast action games. So anyone with that kind of sensitivity, be warned. So other than the frame rate being complete garbage, what's new with this game compared to the original Hyrule Warriors? Surprisingly a fair bit. The game uses every idea Breath of the Wild had and worked it brilliantly into a Warriors game. Like Breath of the Wild, Link has access to all the weapons and their various combat styles, leading him to have a wider moveset than the previous game. So for example, if you gave Link a two-handed sword, he can deal heavy damage at a slightly slower movement. Link is also given a special move at the cost of a little health. You deal a heavy amount of damage to an enemy, and this health can then be restored with a special health button for this weapon, giving a bit of an interesting risk-reward system. You got the Sheikah Slate, and it includes all the powers from before, which can be used to interrupt boss enemy attacks so you can get at their special move gauge. The cool thing about the Slate is that the moves are tailored to each character. For example, Link will just throw the bombs as normal, while Zelda will summon a tank that launches bombs instead. You can also use the elemental rods from Breath of the Wild as well. You launch them like an artillery strike and they can be used to fight the new elemental enemies in the game. Yeah, the devs really used the limited enemies they had in a far more interesting way than they did with the multitude of enemies in the previous game. You can also eat food to restore health instead of using hearts like Breath of the Wild. You can also store food that you don't need so you can heal yourself in other parts of the battle, which in theory is really great, until you found out you can't restore your food reserves outside of battle. You see, for a hub you're given this big map where tons of icons act as missions, upgrades and stores. There are your usual stores such as training, upgrades and items for crafting meals and items, but there are no icons for restoring the food that restores health or replenishing your elemental rods as far as I'm aware. Out of all the upgrades, this one would have been a really useful one. Finally, you can make meals to give a buff to a mission such as XP, health, etc, stuff like that. Next is the characters. Now, Age of Calamity has a smaller cast than the previous game, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Actually, far from it. Every character feels unique from each other, which is really cool. Link, as I mentioned before, feels like his Breath of the Wild appearance, but on steroids. Impa feels like what Naruto has been described to me as, with making clones that attacks people, disappearing, and the hand movement to unleash devastating attacks. Daruk feels like a walking tank. Mintha uses her water abilities to lend it with speed-based attacks. Urbosa hits large groups with lightning attacks, and Rivali is a bitch. What I'm trying to say is you'll find someone you like here. I genuinely believe this game is much better than the previous Hyrule Warriors, but I feel like there's less content. Now don't get me wrong, there's loads of content, and I mean loads. But if you're one of them guys who value 65 hours of a grindfest campaign over 15 meaningful hours of a campaign, get the first game. If you're not stupid, interested in the Warriors genre, or just a big fan of Breath of the Wild, get this game. But let's be honest, we're all here for the story, as it's prominently advertised as a feature of the game. Yeah, that's kind of weird for a Warriors game, but why not? So there are heavy spoilers from here on out. So we all thought it'd be kind of cool to see how the champions lose, or maybe the game might have an impact on the Breath of the Wild sequel. And that's a fair reason to buy the game. That's the reason why I bought it. Well, sadly none of that is true. It's inspired by the story that Breath of the Wild kind of sets up, but it's not that story, no. So the story starts as Calamity Ganon awakens. I'm sorry, but Calamity Ganon sounds like a bad train from Thomas the Tank Engine. That's not a criticism, it's just a statement. As Ganon is taking the castle, a little guardian called Teriko, I probably butchered that name, awakens in Zelda's room. It witnesses the destruction and makes a time portal and goes to the past. You can already smell the retcon in the air. Teriko arrives in the middle of a battle and trips up Link and Impa, causing the Sheikah Slate and the Sheikah Towers to activate, winning the battle. Zelda, Imp, and Link as Zelda's knight decides to take Teriko and the Slate to Robbie and Pura. They learn that Teriko is from the future and that Ganon has awakened in that timeline. After learning this, Zelda is sent to recruit the 4 champions, Mintha, Daruk, Urbosa, and Rivali. Their missions aren't too interesting, except for certain moments like, I don't know, piloting that goddamn divine beasts. After being hinted at their power in Breath of the Wild, we finally get to take these badass machines out for a spin ourselves. And the experience is alright. It's very linear, but it does craft a good moment. It's like driving an A2A2 from Star Wars, except it fires either lava, ice or lightning. Also, Master Koga, Suga and the Yiga clan are introduced in Urbosa's mission. After the Yiga clan loses, they are scolded by Aster, the main villain of the story. The king then tasks the champions to find a knight to wield the Master Sword. This will require them to fight off the monsters in the Korok forest, or in this case just bomb them to oblivion. As they clear the malice throughout the forest, they find out that there's malice replicas of the champions and they gotta beat them to get to the Master Sword. Aster arrives and summons the clones once again to kill Zelda, only for Link to protect her and then finally wield the Master Sword. He then completely wrecks Aster and his clones with the sword. The Great Deku Tree awakens to tell Zelda that Link was chosen by the sword and that her powers will awaken soon. Zelda is still worried about her powers though, but is soothed by Teriko, and then she realises that she's seen him before. However, this is cut short and the army is attacked by monsters. After that, Zelda reflects on Link's strength and how she is weak, only for Urbosa to say that Link is no different from before he had the Master Sword. One thing this story tries to put more emphasis on is Link being an actual character, as, believe it or not, Zelda is the star of this game and Link is just kind of he's a side character in this, believe it or not. He's Zelda's protector. Kind of like how he was in Breath of the Wild, really thinking about it. So it's kind of like how the previous Hyrule Warriors kind of proved Zelda needed a bit of voice acting. This game proved Link needs to speak. I know some people will be mad about that, but it's kind of weird they're trying to characterize him, but he's not showing any of them characteristics. Nintendo needs to do something about that. Maybe at the very least we get somewhat close to Wind Waker Link. He had a lot of character and he didn't say a word. Something like that direction would add a bit more to it. A ceremony is held in which the champions have formally appointed their roles. Pura tells everyone about the towers and Link and Zelda go to activate them all and learn that the Yiga clan has taken over this citadel, a big fortress that people will recognise from the top right corner of the map in the original Breath of the Wild. After beating the Yiga clan, and yeah, there's a bit of a back and forth between these guys with this game, they activate the last tower. Zelda locates the Yiga clan hideout and storms it, only for the leaders to book it. The Yiga clan gets mad at Aster and he doesn't really care, and as Zelda's birthday comes and the king plans to evacuate Hyrule, Zelda walks up to the Spring of Wisdom for one last chance at getting her powers, and sadly it doesn't work. Purah and Robbie get kidnapped by the Yiga clan, and then Calamity Ganon finally arrives. Everyone tries to escape the castle. Zelda is saved by the king, but we kind of watch him die, which is a bit tragic sadly. And finally we see Calamity Ganon take over the Divine Beasts, finally kicking off the events that lead to Breath of the Wild. But then there's an issue. Terrico shoots a beam of light into the sky and summons the champions' descendants from the future, and they help defeat the Blight Ganons that killed the champions. Yeah, the game has retconned Breath of the Wild, or even worse, has started a new timeline. I am dead serious. The game then continues with Zelda gaining her powers, rescuing Purah and Robbie, the Yiga clan getting betrayed by Aster and then joining Zelda, the king revealing he's still alive thanks to a device Zelda gave him before the Calamity awakened. So now that the champions are safe, Zelda's got her powers and Hyrule's been united. They lead a full-on assault on Hyrule Castle to finally defeat Calamity Ganon. They defeat the Blight Ganons for the third time and then take on Aster and his robot. Aster and his robot are, funny enough, consumed by Calamity Ganon, and the result of this also corrupted Terrico, forcing Link to destroy him. In Zelda's grief, it plays her famous lullaby and then it dies. Zelda remembers Terrico was a project she made with her mum, and then makes a kick-ass speech and finally fights Ganon. During the fight, they can't even scratch Ganon until Terrico recovers and bloody kamikazes itself, attacking Ganon. While it finally dies, it does mean Ganon can be harmed. Now Link and Zelda delivered the smackdown of a lifetime on Ganon and finally defeat him. The future champions return to their time, and Terrico is rebuilt, and Hyrule is finally saved. Yeah, that's the game. A big massive cop-out. It's not even the story set 100 years unless Breath of the Wild is now non-canon, which means the story of the sequel is up in the air at the moment. It really depends on what game Nintendo counts as canon. I'm guessing Breath of the Wild, as that was an in-house game and it has sold nearly 20 million units. Outside of that, the story was actually pretty good. It was nice to see Zelda get a leading role for once, and honestly I wouldn't mind seeing more games with her in a leading role. I think Cadence Hyrule kinda did it, but you could choose either one. So yeah, that's something else, something interesting. And then there's those games on the CDI, but we don't talk about them. No, we don't. Overall, despite the marketing, this is an excellent game. I genuinely recommend this game. If you got it for Christmas, you ask for it for Christmas or something like that, you'll have a good time with it. And yeah, that's it. So thank you for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe if you want to see more content. And I hope you all have a good Christmas, a safe New Year and all that jazz. And I will see you in the new year. Bye.